The topic of the message I'm going to be discussing today is how great is your faith? Starting off with the story of Cain and Abel in Genesis chapter 4, verses 3 through 4. The part I'm going to be talking about is their offering, and not about just Cain murdering Abel, as it goes on to talk about. So in verse 3 it says, "In the course of time, Cain presented some of the land's produce as an offering to the Lord. And Abel also presented an offering, some of the firstborn of his flock and their fat portions." At first glance, it looks like Cain and Abel both presented God the same offering. They both went to God and just presented him offering, which looks like a great thing. But finishing verse 4, it says, "The Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but he did not have regard for Cain and his offering." When you think about why the Lord had regard for Abel's offering but not Cain's, if you reread verses 3 and 4 and really look into it, it says, Cain presented some of the land's produce as an offering to the Lord, and Abel also presented an offering, some of the firstborn of his flock. Cain offered and presented some of his produce, some of his land's produce, while Abel presented the firstborn of his flock, meaning whatever he got first from his flock, he gave it to God, to show his faith to God, to show that he believes what he gives to God, he'll receive back for showing his faith. On the other hand, Cain shows that he is being selfish, thinking about himself first and taking in what his produce, which is really what God has blessed him with, his land's produce is his first, and then he'll give God some of that. This shows that the quality of offering to God shows our true heart attitude towards him. It shows how great our faith is, as I mentioned before. If your faith isn't fully towards God and you're relying upon yourself, your heart and attitude will show that by your offering, by giving to yourself first and then providing for God. Even if you are still providing and giving back to God, giving an offering to God, but you're still thinking about yourself first, it shows that you really don't have full faith in God. And going on in this chapter, it shows that God's decision, was right and that he knows all, because in seeing that Cain's heart and attitude wasn't on the right track there, later on he gets jealous for God accepting Abel's gift but not his, and winds up murdering his own brother just because of jealousy. So God saw that his heart and attitude wasn't in the right place, wasn't fully for God, and it foreshadowed to Cain wind up murdering his own brother. Taking this now to the New Testament in Matthew chapter 8, and starting in verse 5. When Jesus entered Capernaum, a centurion who was a Roman officer, typically a Gentile, pleading with him, came to Jesus saying, "Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed in terrible agony." Jesus said to him, "Am I to come and heal him?" "Lord," the centurion replied, "I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed." This centurion shows how great his faith is towards God. He knows that Jesus doesn't even need to be with his servant to heal him. All Jesus has to do is say the word and he could heal him. He believes in God. He believes in God being able to perform miracles. So back and leading into verse 10, Jesus was amazed by hearing this and said to those following him, "Truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with so great a faith." This is pretty profound for Jesus to say this as well, because in Israel, dealing with the Jews, typically you would assume that they would and should have faith with Jesus, seeing firsthand all the things that he's done. But on the other hand, here comes a centurion, a Roman officer who is a Gentile, with so great a faith towards God and towards Jesus, knowing that he could perform these miracles. So these stories really tie in, because it shows that if you go to God, if you really do have faith in God and what he could do for you, and you give him what comes to you first, he will provide for you so much more than you could even imagine. That is something that I'm trying to work on each and every day. How great is my faith? How much am I really putting my trust, my faith in Jesus Christ? Because when times get challenging, when things get tough, just like Cain in this story, he takes for himself first, then gives to God. There could be times where we get like that, where we think, I'll give to God, but if I just make sure that I'm okay first, then I can give to God. That's not the way we have to think. We have to think that God has blessed us with what we have, so we have to give him what he first gave us, in order to receive back those blessings from Him.